Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, your weekly roundup of all the latest Nikon news and all other photographic announcements that we found interesting. It's Konstantin here, and here is
Becky.
All right, so it's number 53.
Wow.
It's the last one in January, and we will start with 400mm coverage. So Nikon announced last Wednesday 400mm officially. So we knew it was in development, but now they said they actually finally developed it and it's ready for release. And in February, I believe, well, they say spring 2022. So it's shifted from February to spring, I've noticed.
Actually, on the Nikon UK store website, it says shipping 17th of February, but on the press release, it said spring. So what does Nikon know that we don't?
They always know and we don't. That's how it normally works.
It's that Z9 scenario all over again where B&H had the date and no one else did.
Yes, let's not talk Z9 today. So let's just, it's no Z9 podcast and we've just lost about 90% of our viewership. But since we talked about all the specs and everything, so we're not going to repeat that. It's 400, it's great, it's expensive, but in hindsight, there's actually, if you look at the prices, it's priced about the same as any other competitors and just a little bit more than the F-mount version. So what we've seen now is actually some reviews, well, actual photographers as well as YouTubers publishing their first hands-on with the lens. We're still waiting for the Richie's definitive analysis, but so far we have Brad Hill.
Yes, good old Brad Hill. Yeah, he's got some thoughts on the subject of the 400mm.
Absolutely. He's quite happy with the lens, first of all. And he says, obviously, it's expensive. He thinks it's going to be great. Couple of things he raised about that. First of all, obviously, it's got a built-in teleconverter. What I didn't think of, that it's actually compatible with external teleconverters. So you can put 1.4 teleconverter or 2x teleconverter together with the lens. And effectively, if you put 2x teleconverter, then you will get 800mm at 5.6. What I didn't quite understand is, can you add teleconverter as well as move the switch on the teleconverter inside the lens? This I'm not 100% sure. I definitely want to know. So if someone in the comment will tell me, I would be definitely happy to hear that.
It says it is combined. It's true. It's not actually clear.
Because 2x teleconverter with 400mm becomes 800mm. So what about if I flick the 1.4 switch on top of that?
Yeah. Okay, we don't know.
We don't know. That's the thing. But it's effectively, we have three lenses in one. 400mm, then 560 or effectively close to 600mm focal distance with the built-in teleconverter. And then by spending not much more, you can get 2x teleconverter and push it to f8 if necessary.
That's right.
Imagine if you pair it up with a DX crop.
Then you get 4 lenses in one.
Absolutely. The list goes on. There's more information came about the new voice coil motor. So apparently it uses magnets instead of whatever previous motors used. But it's not the first lens that used voice coil motors.
No.
So we have 100 to 400.
The 70 to 200 2.8 also has the voice coil motors, the VCMs, and a few other more recent lenses, possibly the 180 to 400, 120 to 300 F-mount lenses. So this is kind of the way forward now with this new motor technology. Much faster, quieter than the silent wave motor, and definitely faster and quieter than the pulse motor as well.
So what you say is in Z400 f2.8, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
Speaking of 70-200 lens, 400 also has SR element, which is a superior element and supposed to be better than ED glass even. So 70-200mm Z lens is fantastic and it has one of those. So we assume that the image quality of 400 is going to be as good as that. And we also have a mesomorphous coat, which is apparently a new coat, and it is better than nanocrystal coat as well as the Arnie coat. So meso can beat Arnie.
Wow.
Who knew?
Who knew? Now on to some reviews. We actually have a field review with the new 400mm 2.8 by Roie Galitz on YouTube. It says field review wildlife photography with the Nikon Z9 as well. So he's got both. Very nice and very enthusiastic about the setup. We also have a review by JANG which is also on YouTube and says all new Nikon Z 400 f2.8 TCVRS. Goes through all the details on how the AF motor works as well as that meso coating that we keep talking about, and has done some good field tests as well.
Definitely. So this is more about actually the technology inside the lens. So if you weren't 100% sure what meso coat is or what voice coil motors are, do check this particular video out.
If you're interested.
Absolutely. And obviously with the announcement of 400mm, Nikon updated their roadmap, so which included the 400mm. It's no more the silhouette of the lens, it's actual lens on that roadmap. Nothing else has changed.
No, in fact, the 800 and the 400 are both exposed
Yeah.
now.
Absolutely. So I think, 200, 600 is definitely way overdue. Who knows? Maybe, we will get 800mm proper release announcement very soon as well, since, they announced the release of 400 after 2 months of development announcements. So I assume in February, March, we will see the proper release date for that.
Yeah.
The next big news, Nikon Z7 Mark II saw a firmware update, and apparently that's improved accuracy of autofocus in poor lit subjects in photo mode. It's not exactly the firmware update that we all been waiting for. So that will require Z6II and Z7II firmware updates released simultaneously. So hopefully that one's still in the works. But that one should fix those bugs in low light conditions for Z7 Mark II.
Yeah, which is very much needed. So it's a welcome addition to the firmware update. And I'm just glad that Nikon are doing it.
That's true. We've seen updates. So obviously everyone is waiting for that definitive version 2.0, and hopefully I'm just hoping it's gonna happen rather soon enough, because it seems like people are ready to go on the barricades and storm the Nikon headquarters.
We want our firmware updates. We want our firmware updates. We can do we can have a picture of people with the little pickets and then just put firmware updates.
Are you ready to duck?
Yeah.
Becky, you're ready to, because the tomatoes are going to fly right now.
They are, and the rotten eggs.
All right, well, that's pretty much all Nikon news. So some Japanese news for our Japanese viewers. Obviously, we have, that's like 70% of all our views. Obviously, they come from Japan. So the new Pokemon was released the other day. So
actually, it's available for pre-order. It's not actually, it comes out on the 28th. Just so you know.
I thought it was a joke, but it's actually it is happening. So
Legends of Arceus Con. Are you downloading it? Are you pre-ordering it? No?
I'm being honest with you, I've never played a Pokemon game in my life.
Outrageous.
Not even one.
So in Japan, apparently the AFS 70-200 f4 EDVR, that great G lens that people know and love, has become discontinued. Whether or not this is fully long-term discontinued or just another one of those situations where the Japanese website has said, old lens. And so then it's assumed that it's been discontinued. We're not entirely sure, but it does say that it is in the discontinued products. We'll see.
Absolutely. And then obviously we are waiting for the Z version of that. I think we are long due for that, but who knows when it's going to come out. Maybe this year, maybe not. It's not on Nikon roadmap, but I think we definitely need one of those. Now, D500 has been out of stock all over the world, and places like B&H and Amazon.com are listing them as discontinued. Do we have any update for our viewers in UK, Becky?
At the time of recording, you can actually order one in the UK.
If you still want one, wherever you are in the world, you can still order it in UK and we'll get it shipped overseas.
Absolutely. In third-party news, Tokina officially announced a new SZ 500mm f8 reflex manual focus super telephoto lens for the Nikon F and Z mounts. This is an extremely compact and lightweight super tele lens. For those of you that have seen the Nikon 500mm f8 reflex, you'll know that that's a tiny lens for a 500mm. It does give you macro shooting capabilities with a 1 to 2.86 magnification, and it gives you that specific donut-shaped bokeh that people seem to really like.
Absolutely, I call it Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts bokeh.
Yep.
It's got apparently easy and precise focusing, according to their press pack, as well as having a super compression effect. So obviously, if you're going to shoot very close with a lens that's like 500, it's going to give you that lovely look.
Absolutely, it's nothing like shooting macro with 500 mirror lens.
It's the kind of thing I would do.
Oh yeah, on Z50, obviously. But it comes in two flavors, in Nikon F flavor and also Nikon Z mint flavor. You can order it at $249 in the United States, apparently. In UK, I guess it's still to come.
Bargain at twice the price.
All right, well, the next one is an interesting one. Okay, it's not related to Nikon, it's related to Canon. Okay, that's famous printer manufacturer. It's a bit of a sad news, but the idea of that news is not to actually poke the bear and say, oh, something's wrong with Canon or something like that, but more to talk about kind of the world shortage of semiconductors and just the whole world we live in. So the news is that Canon is shutting down a major camera factory in China and return to domestic production, facing unprecedented difficulties. And that's on top of actually a good sales year for Canon.
Yes. So here's an interesting anecdote from the Canon China Public Relations Department rep over there, who said in an email to the unfortunate employees at the factory that the company was facing unprecedented difficulties in the camera market due to the pandemic, smartphones, and chip shortages. So it's 3 different assaults. And in fact, we had a conversation about smartphones versus cameras
Yes, absolutely.
just before we started recording this. The PR representative said, despite the joint efforts of the company and all employees, it has failed to reverse the situation. The Canon headquarters has to adjust the overall operation structure of the group. After careful consideration, a difficult decision has to be made to terminate the company's camera production. So the closure of the factory mainly impacts Canon's compact cameras and the affordable DSLR EF range.
So point and shoot and basically entry-level DSLRs.
Yeah, and the smaller lenses like the sort of nifty 50. So it is speculated that Canon may kind of pull out of the consumer market, but I don't think that would be the case. That would be kind of like shooting themselves in the foot, I would have thought.
Well, yes and no. If
we compare it to what we were talking about with Nikon.
Yeah, if you compare it to Nikon, when Nikon said we're going to go to close sales, high margin products, and effectively those expensive full-frame cameras, it seems like Canon leaning towards the same direction.
Yeah.
So, and again, Canon is continuing to be one of the leaders of photographic industry. So it is a very interesting development.
I'd be interested to know the viewers' thoughts on this. Obviously, entry-level cameras have had their place for years, but with smartphones being as good as they are now, and I was saying to Con right before we started recording how when I'd gone out with my camera on the weekend, it was just me by myself, and I did feel slightly paranoid, whereas if I'd been carrying around my smartphone and just taking pictures with my phone, nobody would have looked at me twice. But the fact that I had a reasonably big camera automatically makes people kind of wary of you and go like, oh, big camera. And from a also personal safety point of view, I don't always feel safe unless I'm with someone else taking pictures.
We all now have to come in groups.
Group packs of photographers. But I just thought it's interesting because most people who are getting into photography, will they now just save the extra to buy a slightly more premium camera rather than buying an entry-level camera, which has always been a great idea, but if your smartphone can do as good as one of those, arguably not, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely. But the problem we face as photographers, where we want to get obviously the latest and greatest, but then for some of us who like to shoot street, we want also be quite compact. So you're not going to go and shoot street life photography with that 9 per se, and 70-200 or something like that. Of course you can. I'm sure some of you will do that, but
just try not to get arrested.
Exactly. Or poke someone's eye with the lens. If you think about it, we kind of try and think, okay, how do we downsize? So, and we're going to talk about small cameras later on, Becky, but I think because we are being Nikon-centric podcast, it's an interesting news that coming from the other camp, just see what development as actually what's happening globally in the world, just for us to see the bigger picture as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of smaller cameras, Petapixel published an article which is called The Best Used Digital Cameras to Buy in 2022. They have 3 segments. The first one is the best used DSLR cameras. Nikon wins ultra budget option at Nikon Z700.
Nice.
They also win budget option between $500 and $1,000 with Nikon D800 and D800E, as well as D810. Mid-range is won by Canon, but higher range is won by Nikon D850.
Yes, at $1,500 plus. We also have best used mirrorless cameras. So the ultra budget under $500 option seems to be the Olympus OMD EM1 or EM5 Mark II.
So micro four thirds.
Yeah. And then the budget option is the Fuji X-T3 or XS10. Mid-range between $1,000 and $1,500 is the Nikon Z6 or Nikon Z7. I can definitely vouch for those as good value at the moment, particularly with the current version of the firmware on the 6 and 7, it's phenomenally fast.
Definitely, absolutely.
It's like a new camera. And then the high end is actually the Sony Alpha 7 R3 or the 3A. Now,
they also have a best used compact fixed lens camera category, and Nikon is not there. And obviously it's not there because actually Nikon doesn't have a camera in this segment. So if you're going to look at those cameras, so we have Sony cameras, we have Leica cameras, so Leica Q1 or Q2, which is obviously very expensive, but it's got a built-in lens. What do you think, Becky? Do you think Nikon should actually make a camera like this, or full frame with a built-in lens, something like Nikon 35 Ti or L35 AF?
Well, if you think about this little project that Nikon had called the DLs, which were okay, fine, they weren't full frame cameras, but they had fixed lenses and they were sort of premium. When we first saw the announcement for those, we actually held waiting lists for every single model of those cameras. I think one had a built-in sort of 27mm equivalent.
Yes.
One was a 24 to 85 and one was a long range one. And there was an audience for those. There actually were people that really were queuing up to buy them. And of course, then Nikon said, financially, this is not a wise move.
That's true. Those were DX cameras, and they would compete in line with something like X100 series from Fujifilm and also Record GR. Now, we also had a Coolpix A, which was a 28mm fixed focal distance DX camera, and that one cost about £1,000, which was in line with other brands. It didn't sell really well and was discontinued quite quickly. You can still pick them up on eBay fairly cheaply, actually. So if you want a camera like this, I would recommend that. But now, what do you think? If you skip the DX range, do you think we would ever see a full frame built-in lens 35mm compact?
I don't see Nikon doing one. I'm trying to think of what it would be or what kind of sensor it would have in it. I think that Nikon would be more likely to do an APS-C size sensor. I would be curious to know what Nikon could put in it that would make it cost effective to produce something like that, and the popularity of it, because it would have to have at least a 24 megapixel, if not 45 megapixel sensor. If it's going to be a premium product, then obviously 45 megapixel.
Yeah. I think we're going to talk about premium products here, because if you look at the current full-frame offerings from Sony, so their RX1R Mark II camera is priced at $2,999, so £3,000. And then Leica Q2 is priced at $4,500 and Leica Q1 at $3,500. So it will be a premium compact. I think there is an opportunity there. Obviously, it's not going to sell in big markets, but there are people who would buy a camera like this. And if Nikon price it attractively and undercut the other brands, so like something like £2,000, that would be quite interesting. I would be interested in something like a Z6 size body, maybe make it a little bit smaller with a built-in 35 compact lens, because 35 1.8 is quite large. So make it 35, maybe 2.5 or f2, and make it much smaller, priced at $1,999. And who knows, we might have a winner on our hands.
Like a digital 35 Ti.
Yeah, something like this.
Nice, I like that idea.
Tell us what you think. Would you buy one of those? Obviously, it's not a huge market product, so it's not going to sell in millions, but there are people who buy those cameras. I know there's a big community of Leica Q users. I'm sure there are people, Sony people who use those cameras. And obviously, if you look at something like X100V, which is priced about £1,400 in UK, it sells really well. And again, there's a huge community of street light photographers behind it.
Yeah, great.
Tell us what you think in the comments below.
Next up in software news, Capture One has discontinued the standalone versions for Nikon and all other brands. So Capture One did actually have standalone versions that were locked into your particular brand. So the full Capture One 22 flagship product is $100 more expensive than the Nikon branded version. But if you already have a perpetual license for version 22 of Capture One for Nikon, you'll get a free upgrade to the full version in early April 2022.
Absolutely. I think it makes sense here. If you got one of those, so buy one of those right now, because you should get a free upgrade in April.
Yay.
But for me, well, I like Capture One and the image quality that it produces. So obviously, raw files coming out of Nikon cameras are developed really well in Capture One software. What I hate about Capture One is their pricing structure, because it goes all over the place. So we had different versions for different brand, which is now gladly is being streamlined to a main version. But again, it was a cheaper version. Then we had perpetual licenses, we had upgrades, and we had discounts pretty much 12 a month a year. Then we have also subscriptions, etc., etc. So I think Capture One really needs to streamline their subscription, because it is really difficult to understand for, let's say, people who use Lightroom and they want to switch, because there's so many offers that people get confused, because it's just too many options, and which one is the right one, it's really difficult to figure out.
Indeed.
All right, let's move to reviews. So we have some reviews and tests this time. So we have Christopher Malcolm published his in-depth review on Z9 after shooting with it every day for a whole month.
So he said, as a lover of DSLRs and specifically the D850, which he plans to keep until his final days, he says, I think the biggest compliment I can give the Z9 is that it is the most DSLR-like shooting experience I've ever had with a mirrorless camera. If you already love mirrorless, that might not mean much to you, but if you are like me and have always preferred the optical viewfinder and shooting speed of a DSLR, this is quite possibly the mirrorless camera you've been waiting for, if you've got a spare $5,000. He didn't say that. It allows you to be creative and it gets out of the way. So we've posted the whole article, a link to it in the description box and in the podcast notes if you'd like to have a read of that. But it's interesting to finally get some reviews from people who are using it all the time, as opposed to those quick, we went down to the park and shot some London traffic reviews, which are great in their own right. And we really do try our best, but it's very different to having a professional photographer who's out in the field with it every single day.
Absolutely. And Christopher Malcolm also shoots a lot of video as well. So he talks about video functionality of Z9 as well.
Excellent.
All right. Then we have an ISO performance test, which was published by Licht und Schatten Photography website. So I guess it's German. And they compare ISO performance of Z9, Z6, J50, and Fuji XS10. So he says that ISO of Z9 is very good. And but Z6 still wins this competition. So it seems like Z6 is still the best camera for low light in terms of low light performance.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then Matt Irvin, he got hold of 28 to 75 Z lens.
Lucky him. He said, is it for you? Is it a Tamron? His first impressions. We also know that Matt is out and about shooting with the Z9 now, so hopefully we'll see some reviews from him very soon on that. Speaking of Matt, we actually are going to be hosting him as a special guest on our Friday live stream.
Surprise, surprise.
It is at a time which is more convenient for him because obviously 3 o'clock or 2:15 in the afternoon in the UK, where he is about 1 a.m. and that's just not nice for anyone.
Yeah, so for some of you in the United States, you're welcome to get up early, have a nice, beautiful cup of coffee, and enjoy a wonderful conversation about Nikon equipment with us and Matt Irvin.
Absolutely.
All right, the next we have Christopher Frost as well, who published his review on 24-120 lens. He loves it very much. He says it's fantastic lens for landscape photography. He also feels like it's basically trumps all the other 24-120s, just full stop. And I absolutely agree with him. For me, this lens is a revelation. It's basically returned my trust in that focal distance of just a range of 24-120 lenses because, as I said before, I was not impressed.
No. Our review will be coming soon on that one too.
Absolutely. We are testing it now, as well as 100-400 lens. So ask us anything.
Within reason. Next up, we have Nikon FTZ Essential Info and Speed Tests by Steve Perry. So Steve Perry, who's a fantastic wildlife photographer, YouTuber, and knows everything there is to know about the best autofocus options, has actually done his tests on how long it takes for a lens to focus with the FTZ on various different cameras in points of a second. And it's all very visual. So go and have a look at his YouTube video on his channel.
Here you go. So for a quick example, so J50 plus 600mm lens focusing is half a second. Z6 with 600mm is 1.1 second. And Z9 with 600mm lens, so via FTZ silicon converter, is also half a second, which is very interesting. That kind of confirms our impression that all the big lenses, the big professional lenses mounted via FTZ on a Z camera, especially Z9, perform pretty much the same as they would perform on something like D6 or J850.
For sure.
All right, let's move on to We Can Read and Watch, the film edition.
So first up, we have an article for you by Matt Wright on 35mmC, that blog that many of you will know, which is entitled, Is Bulk Loaded Cinefilm a Panacea for Rising Film Prices?
And if you don't understand what any of this word meant, that's absolutely fine.
If you're a film photographer and you're considering cinefilm, there are a few different options to choose from. He does talk through that, but he also talks about the fact that how do you buy bulk loaded cinefilm?
You can buy Vision 3 500T film in bulk, 100 feet. Yeah, so something similar that you would buy Ilford black and white film normally. So that's what designed for, ideally, you know. But Vision T, so you can actually roll it up into the cassettes. Yeah. The problem with that film is actually you have to use ECN2 processing instead of C41,
right,
which is a lot harder to do at home. You apparently need to have 5 bottles of chemicals and several types of washing. You also will need to remove the rim jet from, and that requires, removing it and also washing extra film, etc., etc. So that is quite complicated when you do it at home. Now, comparing to the prices of developing C41, in UK, the cheapest one could be had about $2.99, but general price is between 4 and 5 per roll film. Something like ECN2 Pro, so there are only about 3 places in UK that develop that, and they charge £8 per roll.
Right.
So the point of this article is really thinking, well, normally buying film in bulk and loading up should be cheaper. In this case, at the moment, it's about the same unless you're willing to process your film at home. But since Kodak increased their prices by about 20% this year, so a lot of film photographers are having a dilemma. Do I continue to shoot film, which we all love and enjoy, or do I switch to digital? Now, obviously, about 10% of our comments will say, I never looked back since I switched to digital. Some of us still prefer the pain of shooting film, and we love it to death because the tones are there, and you can't get them with digital. Prove me wrong.
Shots fired. All right. Next up, we have Apollo 11 cameras, Ektachrome, and making Kodak film. This is a Robert Shanebrook interview on YouTube. Now, for those of you that don't know, Robert Shanebrook is, well, he's seen it all. From making cameras for Apollo moon missions to presiding over Kodachrome, he's held multiple positions at Kodak and actually worked at the Eastman Kodak company for 35 years before retiring in 2003. He even has a book, you said.
Yeah, so he published this book, which is called Making Kodak Film, expanded second edition. So he published first one is, I think, back in 2010, which was 97 pages. Now, the second edition came out a couple of years ago, and it's 470 pages.
Wow.
So that's a bit expensive, but it cost a whopping $178 delivered to United Kingdom. Straight from him, it's not sold on Amazon, but it is on my shopping list. So if we all pitch in, our film lovers, everyone put their 20 quid in, we may be able to get one of those.
Might be able to pick one up. That would be good.
Absolutely, every little helps. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching us. The final plug that we have is...
We are on Vahography's YouTube channel. We did an interview with him live. So we're being interviewed, actually. That can be found on Vahan's channel. Go check it out. Give it a like. Subscribe to his channel, fellow Nikon lover. It's great fun.
Absolutely. We don't know what's going to happen yet because we're recording this on Monday and we're going to have this live stream straight after this. So when you see us, who knows what's going to be there? It could be a facepalm all the way. You never know. Come and join us in the past.
Well, thank you very much for watching and or listening. Please give us a like and a subscribe if you're on YouTube, and a follow and maybe even a review if you're on a podcast platform.
Absolutely. Speaking of podcast, Becky, we finally reached 1,000 listens per week. Okay, that's really good. So if you are one of the 1,000 people that listen to us, well, one of 1,000 people, not plural yet, but do leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice because it pushes us through the ratings of Apple, Spotify, you name it,
etc.
Absolutely. And if you want to talk to us, not too much, but just a little, we're also available on our Instagram accounts. Becky is
Rebecca_Danese.
I'm at Konstantin Kochkin. If you see me raving about last week's game of Crystal Palace versus Liverpool, where we were robbed of our loss 2-1 by a referee, then do let me know. I'm sure our Liverpool supporters will let me know for sure.
Yes. Thank you very much for watching.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for watching.